Welcome to the Six Hats podcast, where I, Dr. Shami, a lifestyle and nutritional medicine family doctor, will talk about how women strive to find balance each day by juggling their six roles, being a woman, mother, daughter, partner, business owner, and professional. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Six Hats podcast. And today is going to be a really exciting conversation. I've been really looking forward to this. So I'm joined with Ella Rowe. She is the proud owner of Elvies Studios, a natural hair sanctuary in Collingwood. She's a new single mum to a bright and sparkly 2.5-year-old toddler and has run Elvies since she was pregnant, building her small business and raising her child until now. She's also an educator and artist and is excited for the school holidays coming up. So welcome, Ella.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation.
So Ella, I'd love for you to share a bit about your story. We love a good story. What kind of inspired you to start your business? Because it's not just any hair studio. It's quite specialized and there's a story behind it, which I'd love for you to share.
Absolutely. So my studio is called Elvies Studio. It's named after my mother, Elvie. And the reason being is I feel like she was my main motivator and supporter with most of the decisions that I've made in my life, even if they were crazy. She was always the one that was like, yes, Ella, if you want to do that, you have my full support. But also she was the first Afro that I ever cut. She taught me how to cut her hair. And I guess I got to a point during the pandemic that we recently experienced where I really felt like the earth or the lands were separating and I had to either jump to make a change or I needed to accept where I was and continue down that path. So I was actually a teacher and youth worker and I really loved the role that I played and I loved the young people that I worked with, but I was very frustrated by the system. And I found that using my skills of hairdressing, I was able to really connect with young people in a way that was like beneficial to both of us. I felt like it helped me to realize that I had something that I could connect with people with. And so I thought, I have worked in the hairdressing industry for many, many, many years. I worked for mainstream hairdressing salons. I worked in musical theatre and I did hair for bridal and photographic work and all sorts of things. But what I did find was that European hair or straight hair or up to a kind of like a wavy texture was usually scented. And I thought I've grown up with seeing my mum and my aunties doing their hair in the backyard, in the kitchen, on the veranda. And I was like, why have my mums never had a place? These are mums who have supported me every step of the way. Why have they never been pampered, looked after, or had a safe place where they can go and get their hair done? And I realized the truth is that there are many different structures in this society that sadly uphold quite racist ideals. And I realized that the hairdressing industry was one of those. And that was that they don't actually have training that exists in the qualification to become a hairdresser that covers how to care for tight textured Afro hair. And so because I had the lived experience and I'd built a bit of a reputation for taking care of this hair, I thought, I want to change. I want to be in charge. I don't like being undervalued and unappreciated. I knew what I could do. And so I just dreamed up this idea, which was to create a space. And I thought, I've been able to create classrooms and safe places for young people who are at risk and had high needs. And I thought, look, I've got some pretty good skills here. How can I use them to benefit my community? And also hopefully make some money out of it so that I can have a sustainable income and continue to hopefully live a lifestyle where I can make choices for myself that I might not be able to make if I'm not the boss.
That's amazing. And I love that was actually a real insight for me in terms of the training most hairdressers get in Australia. So that's really insightful because you're absolutely right. Where did you learn? Does that mean that you had to find your own training? Or this is something that you grew up with and your mum taught you? And how did you learn?
I think I learnt through practice. I definitely learnt from my mum. I learnt by doing my own hair. I learnt by, I guess, sort of not so much social media. I feel like the new generation definitely learned from YouTube and I hear them talking about that often, but I wasn't really a YouTuber growing up. I think that it was more the hands-on experience and also sort of being drawn to other people of colour, other BIPOC people in spaces. So they then became my clients and they taught me. And I feel like I've actually learned a lot, even through the last 3 years here at Elvies. I've learned from my clients. They've brought knowledge to me that has helped to nourish and nurture the way that I practice my work. And a lot of that is also founded and, I guess, deeply considered around what does our hair mean to us? What are our hair ceremonies and rituals? And how do we take care of our hair in our different cultures? And how does that affect the way that I approach my clients here in my space?
That's incredible. But I want to go a couple of steps back. And I love, you're so bubbly, so enthusiastic. Were there any moments where you go, what am I doing? Especially when starting a business?
Many, many moments. As I get older, I'm starting to realize that they're around the week before my period, usually.
Right.
So
The doubts kicks in.
the
Yeah.
doubt, the self-doubt. I had many moments where I would wake up and not feel like I was per se qualified. I mean, you can't be qualified in curly, tight texture in this country anyway, but I felt like I wasn't qualified. Like, who did I think I was doing this? I didn't like being called a specialist. I felt uncomfortable about saying that I was a CEO. And just interestingly, recently I was in a training session with a wonderful chartered accountant and business coach, Fee of Peach Business. And she talked about, or a member of the group in the Zoom talked about us needing to shift our mentality. And in a world that is run by men and patriarchal, your average guy will call himself an expert. And yet we as women, and then on top of that, we add the intersectionality of like being women of color or being women of different genders, etc. We would never say that so confidently. And so I heard that, and I actually on that day shifted my thought. And I thought, if I don't go out and be even more confident, even more bubbly, who will? And that's been my calling. That's my purpose. So I need to grab it by, I was going to say the balls, but like, I feel like that's what's happened to me too, in terms of like single parenting and motherhood. Like, it really kind of empowers you and teaches you that you really do only have yourself to be your biggest fan. And so, yeah, I've definitely had self-doubt. I definitely see it a lot as well, manifesting in like other women of color in the hair industry, almost being afraid to connect with other, like the rest of us. Or I've tried to build relationships with some people and I've just felt there's been a bit of pushback. And I think it is this fear of like, oh, but if I share what I know, then they'll take from me. Or
So true.
they want to make us compete, but that's the capitalist. That's not an indigenous way of thinking. If we think, I like to get my inspiration from indigenous ways of thinking, and I like to think of all of us as like really important islands in an archipelago. And if we don't have each other to connect with, we aren't that bigger mass, right? And we do exist, and each island is important.
There's so much to unpick there. Wow, I love this, where this conversation is heading. Because the first one I would love to sort of say is that the narrative we tell ourselves, the story we tell ourselves as women. And number one, and what they say about women going for jobs, they always think that they have to know what to do. And so jobs are for women, they base it on the past, but men go, oh yeah, I can do that. And then they speak with so much confidence. So confidence it's a major thing. And also about I call it a scarcity mindset, that scarcity of being successful, scarcity of money. It's almost like you think there's only one pot of money for everyone to share, everyone to be successful, when actually it's limitless. And we've got to, as women, start really supporting each other and raising each other's energy to succeed. Because imagine a world, and I always think, imagine a world where everyone really followed their true purpose and meaning and felt that they could do what they needed to do, because all the dreams are just sitting inside you.
They can do anything, anybody, any of us can.
Absolutely.
And that's what I've found, is that once starting the journey, and this was the bit too, and I kind of am grateful for my father for this mentality. Like, he always said, you can be anything you choose to be. You just need to decide for yourself and you can make it happen. You're going to be doing that. And so I was always very confident. And I think that balanced with a mum who was very, very passionate about like my identity, my cultural identity. Who am I? I come from Waimea village in Papua New Guinea. It's from Milne Bay province. My mum made sure that I knew, even though I grew up oceans away from my family, I knew where I came from and where I belonged. And therefore, when I walked through the world and I had people challenging me, oh, I don't know if you can do that, or, oh, should you do that? I'd be like, yeah, I mean, I'm representing all my family. Like I'm representing all my people and I get to be here and I get to do this. I also wish sometimes that I was with them and I had the experience of growing up saturated in my culture. But I think that that makes me even more fierce about it because I am growing up away. And so, of course, I've got more to prove, you know what I mean? But also it's a way of like continuing to like nurture my self-belief because I need to be able to see reflections of me, like I'm visual. And I know that that's a part of what supports my community here at Elvies is that when they walk in, they feel at home, they feel at ease. I don't just call it a sanctuary for nothing. Like people come here and they can tell me their hair stories. They feel heard and seen. Whether the stories are big and deep or surface level, they still can feel like they're stories that are valued. And having all my traditional baskets and our carvings and our artwork, like I think all of these are like resources and reminders of like where our core, like where we deeply come from, especially when we are migrants and settlers on Indigenous land. And I think that bringing us back to ourselves is empowering, it's enriching, and it helps us to then recognize or see things from a place or a position of power because we can then really decide, you know, do I want to continue to walk that way and to be that way and to work in that structure? Or do I want to actually be like, you know what, I'm sick and tired of this pushback. How can I get together with my community and we do it our way? Which is what I've seen you guys do at Mint Clinic, which I absolutely love.
Amazing, amazing, Ella. I love for you to also share. You mentioned the Indigenous culture and what you draw from it, and you did touch on it, but I want you to elaborate all those beautiful strengths that you can draw from it. And I think that's a message we need to spread to the world. And it's hidden, not talked about. And I want to talk about more about it.
Well, I think that I know that I'm a migrant on these lands. I know that these are the lands that I'm on right now are Wurundjeri lands of the Kulin Nations. The language group is the Woiwurrung. And I just like, again, my mum was very passionate about Indigenous rights. Even though she grew up in Papua New Guinea, she knew that Australia had Indigenous people. And I think that back thousands of millions of years ago when the lands were connected, Papua New Guinea and Australia land masses were actually one. So like we do share heritage with Indigenous people of Australia. And I think that you'll find, you know, they are the oldest living culture in the world. And we this government doesn't appreciate that. And I think that the wider community don't understand how important it is that we do listen to Indigenous people because their knowledge of their land, their knowledge of custom is what works most harmoniously with this land. And if we don't start listening to them, we won't have this land anymore. And I think that their connection with the earth is something that we all need to start to recognize, but also being able to like acknowledge their practices. So like when I'm in here, I try to acknowledge the Indigenous hair practices and rituals. I try to show my respect to the way that the hair was done and the ceremonies that were practiced here before we were here, before all the concrete and the roads and the streets. And like it also helps me to then go back and say, okay, well, what were my own people's practices? And I grew up sort of learning a lot about different things like hair being used for magic, for example. Like where I'm from in Papua New Guinea, it's quite well known for black magic. And there are things that people do with people's hair. And I find that that then becomes a connector when I'm talking to a lot of people from the African diaspora and other Pacifica people. They'll be like, oh yeah, well, we do this or we have this ceremony. And again, it connects all of us, it ties us all in, and it helps us to understand that it isn't just hair, it's heritage, it's our lineage, it's sacred. Like our hair is so sacred. And when we bring that like deeper meaning and understanding and value and respect to our work, people feel more valued. And when you feel more valued and you have authentic relationships, you connect. And that's actually what Indigenous ways of thinking are. It's actually, we are nothing without each other.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And that's what I really wanted to share. We need each other. We cannot do this alone. And this is a great time to sort of lead on to the next journey of your life, Ella, which happened not too long ago, you being a single mom. So how was that for you? How was that journey?
So I've had my ups and my downs with it. I think that different emotions come up. There's grief. There's like letting go of what I perceived to be something that I thought that I wanted, letting go of like preconceived ideas around what relationships look like. I guess I feel like proud that I've been able to navigate in a really respectful way. And so has my daughter's dad. Like, he's a wonderful person and I value him so much for everything that he brings. And I think that I knew that when we first got together, that he'd be a wonderful father. And I think it's just being able to recognize when things aren't working and when you've tried a few options and you've pushed for a few other ways to grow together and there's no movement. I guess I just decided that I needed to keep moving in a different direction. But I'm loving the way that we're co-parenting, and I guess it's been hard because I've been learning more about what my rights are, what services exist out there for single mums and for people like myself. And I think also it's been like really like eye-opening in terms of being able to accept help. I think that growing up being quite fierce and independent, I haven't always known how to ask for help. And I think that it then manifests in a lot of stress and anxiety that like then actually that made me sick. So I did find that like my mental health deteriorated. I started to have issues around when I would finish work and what my life looked like outside this space, and being able to like step away and do some therapy and like visually like put all my different like aspects of my life in different bubbles and looking at it from a bird's eye view really helped me to sort of also see what I needed for myself. And that was to like come back to my own identity, because I started my business. I fell pregnant 3 months in. I was pregnant and hormonal the whole way through to birth. My birth was quite traumatic. I then had a few postpartum issues. And I was just reading recently that some mums, we only really kind of start to find ourselves again after 5 years of parenting. So I think I have had the skills to be able to do that personal identity work through painting and writing poetry and doing hair, connecting with my community. Yeah. And so having those sort of like skills at hand to reach upon, I feel that I'm lucky that I've had those, because I think a lot of people find themselves in ruts and they don't know which direction to move in. And I've been lucky that I've had options. So I feel good. But that's not every day. There are days when I'm not feeling good. And it's hard to face community and to give and to be what I want to be for my community when I'm going through my own hardship. But I think that what does help is being honest. And so there are times when I shed tears in here. It's not only my clients that can show me emotion. I try to be as authentic as possible and often show my emotions as well, while of course always being very aware of like not burdening people. But I think it's also when you're honest, people appreciate it because then they can be honest too.
Absolutely. I'd love to take you back. I think it takes a lot of courage to move forward and think about change. And many people can find themselves quite stuck with familiarity because it's really comforting, and it's a lot of courage to go, actually, this is not working for me. I need to move. I need to change. At some point, were you scared? Did you sort of say, wow, I'm going to be a single mom, I've got this business? Were you scared to make that decision? And how did you overcome that?
I have had many scary moments. Like, my parents were away in Europe for 6 weeks and I really did feel alone. I didn't want to worry my mum and my dad while they were away. I wanted them to have like a carefree holiday in Europe, which they deserved. So they're usually my rocks. And so not having them, it actually meant that I reached out to other people, and I found that there were some really beautiful friends that were there for me and that held space for me and truly listened to me. And I think that was a big eye opener. Like, I think we sometimes get stuck in like the binary of like your relationship. So your unit, and you give so much energy to the unit that sometimes you forget about those other layers of connection outside that unit. And so I feel like I was able to reach out and again accept support and be really vulnerable in ways that like I haven't been used to being vulnerable, I guess. But yeah, I think that like I also, when you've got a child, you behave in ways that you haven't behaved before. I remember coming out of the birth feeling like Beyonce with the baseball bat in that music video where she's smashing all the windows. Like, I'm not going to swear in this podcast, but I was literally like, if anyone wants to take me on, don't bother. No one can ever treat me the way that I accepted being treated before I gave birth to this child. Like, you make a human, and, you know, motherhood is so empowering that, for me anyway, I've been lucky that, yes, I had like birth trauma and I've been working through it and all of those things. But like, I think at the end of the day, that sort of instinct, that mother instinct of like, I need to do what I need to do to role model to my child the world that I want her to grow up in a world that, like, yeah, that is authentic, that has connection, that also, like, I burst into tears in front of my child all the time watching Netflix TV series and all that sort of stuff. And she holds space for me. Like, she's 2.5 and she will literally hold my face.
Oh,
She'll look at me and she'll hold my face and she'll look into my eyes deeply. And she doesn't even have to say words, but I can tell that she's looking at me saying, I love you, Mum. I love how authentic you are. I love that you share your feelings with me. Like, I can hear her saying that, and she doesn't even have words. But I think that's your connection with your child. And so I think that's what helps me overcome. You do it because you know that you need to look after yourself, to look after your kids. And so then you put in place what you need to put in place to move on. And what I was going to say when you first initially asked the question was that I think also one of the biggest stresses is finances. It's money. So when I started to actually go, all right, how do I get help with this? How do I reached out to Fee from Peach Business, and I thought, okay, I'm going to get advice from Fee. I'm going to reconnect with her and get my finances for my business sorted. I'm going to reach out to Orange Door. They happened to put me on the phone with another Ella, which made me feel immediately aligned. And I was like, you're my person, let's go. She gave me all of these resources I didn't even know existed. I didn't know they existed. I used to be the youth worker and the social worker and the teacher. I used to be the one giving that advice and that service. Now I'm receiving it and I'm like, oh, I'm going to accept this help and I'm going to actually take the steps to make that phone call. I'm going to take the steps to get that advice about my finances. So yeah, I think it's about like being organized when you've got capacity, and then when you don't have capacity, sitting down and letting someone rub your feet.
I don't actually know much about Orange Door. What's that?
I don't exactly know what Orange Door is, but I called them and they gave me so much advice. They sent me emails with all of the links to all of the resources that are out there for us. And they really are just a phone call away.
Is that for any particular group or women sort of stepping out on their own?
For me, I feel like it was for single mums.
Yeah.
Or it could just be for single parents. I don't think it's gendered. I asked the ladies at reception at my kindergarten where my daughter goes, and my mum suggested that. My mum was like, your kinder people will be dealing with parents all the time. You ask them for advice.
Brilliant.
You know, and they had to tell me a few times, go and get advice. Like, that was the tone I got from both my parents, because they said, we are not qualified to help you. You go and get proper advice and find out what you're entitled to. And all of those things have helped me to feel more secure and more held and less fearful of what the future holds financially. I think that was my biggest concern. And like, I'm lucky. I feel fortunate that my safety isn't in jeopardy. I'm so grateful that my ex and I have a healthy relationship, and I have so much compassion for those people who have all those other layers of challenges. And so that's the part is that, like, I actually look to my life. I try to practice gratitude. I'm sitting in a room right now surrounded by everything that, like, I love, and I get to love everyone from this space. So, like, who cares about money? Money comes and goes. For me, it's about relationships. If I love on my clients and they love me, then they might come back. And if I do that to enough people, then hopefully enough people will come through and help me cover the costs.
Amazing. So many amazing points. I think the one that you just highlighted is to ask for help, is to get advice. And you're spot on. You know, we're living in Australia, abundance of help available if you know where to go, who to ask. Absolutely. But before we leave you, Ella, I'd love for you to share. You've got some amazing characteristics of just moving forward, the positivity and that vulnerability, the authenticity. But how do you stay mentally well at times of, I would say, challenges? What do you do?
I try to be aware of where I am in my cycle and how that's affecting my hormones and my emotions. I try to practice compassion. So rather than, if I hear a voice in my head saying, you're not ready, you're not good enough, I try to kind of catch it and throw it away. And I do a lot of like mental practice around positive thinking about myself. I try to get a massage as often as I can afford to. Even sometimes when I can't, I'll still do it because I find massages to be very relaxing. I try just more recently, since my daughter's had time with her dad on the weekends, I'm doing the things that make me feel good, that fill my cup up, that give me my soul energy. And they're things like going out and dancing, going and having a drink responsibly, going to exhibition openings. I love people, and being in my studio and giving and servicing all the time is exhausting and draining. And so I want to go out there and be who I am free in the world. And so not guilting myself because I've been out all weekend and I'm struggling a bit today because I'm a little bit tired, but it's not a tiredness of like disappointment. It's tired because I really reconnected with people and I loved it. So feeding off that. And then, of course, trying to get as much rest, try to eat well. I've got an amazing personal trainer at my local gym that I see once a week. She's on holidays at the moment. I have not been to the gym, but I'm going to go back when she gets back.
Excellent.
So, just trying to do what I can in the time that I have and not beating myself up, because I think that negative self-talk and that can really spiral and you can end up in a really dark place.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story, Ella. I think it's really, really important we do talk about the ups and downs of life, and it's very easy just to focus on all the great wins, but the reality of it, there will always be challenges, and how do we navigate our way through them? So it's amazing, so inspiring. Thank you so much, Ella.
Thank you. I actually have one more thing I want to add.
Go on.
For me, I think that this is something that we need to look into more and support people more with. But I think that we should be more communal when it comes to eating and feeding our families. So I have a lot of friends that live in share houses that aren't parents who love cooking. And more recently, I had a friend drop food off to me. And people do it a lot when you've just had your baby and they bring food trains. But I think that food trains should be a part of your weekly routine. We have different skills that we can offer community and our friends. And why are we not leaning into those skills and sharing them and sharing the load and sharing the finances so that things like food are not wasted? And that's one thing that I have really appreciated is being fed, because I don't always have time to cook. Even though I can cook and I love healthy food, I don't always have the time. So to know that there's a friend that lives 10 minutes away who always cooks too much and I can have some food, I really appreciate that. So I think we should think more about that.
I totally agree. Couldn't agree with you more about the community, the impact it has, and how in life we're not meant to be doing this by ourselves. We're not meant to be going solo. And I could go on for many hours about the stories I hear of how many are navigating life on their own. And it's not meant to. You're meant to have a community around you to share the load. But what a great reminder. Thank you, Ella.
Thanks for having me.
Remember that this is general advice only. Please see your healthcare professional for more information. So what's your take-home message today? Remember, it's all about progress and not perfection. And are you suffering from stress? Visit the Usawa Learning Hub on usawa.com.au for more resources on how to de-stress, re-energize, and reclaim your health. Enjoy the journey.